Let's do it. Chris, such a pleasure having you here. Man, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you. It's my pleasure, man. It's a great time to be reaching out to even more people, isn't it?
Absolutely. So I wanted to kick this off. Let's start with your masterclass video. So
Right.
I think anyone with an internet connection will have seen this. It was so beautifully done. And I think you did it, and the masterclass people did a great job of really getting interest at such an early point in the video. I know you say everything in life is a negotiation. When you cross the street, it's a negotiation. Getting a coffee at Starbucks, you're probably in 3 to 7 negotiations every single day. Your
Easily,
life could
yeah.
be an entirely different place if you just learned to negotiate. So could you talk us through that message?
Yeah, and it's a negotiation collaboratively. This is not win-lose stuff. And we don't even use the term win-win either, but it's definitely not win-lose. I mean, the opportunities to collaborate are all around us. I mean, one of the sayings that we live by is never be mean to someone who could hurt you by doing nothing. And so if you think about it, you think, well, wow, like everybody that I talk to about something could probably hurt me by failing to collaborate, by doing nothing, by pretending like, there's nothing I could do, I'm not involved. So if that's true, the other side of that coin is everybody could help you if they felt like it. Everybody you talk to, if they just felt like it. And it's astonishing what people, the little things that they could do incrementally that can make your life better each and every day, collaboratively, because interacting with you made them feel better. Like I called the credit card company the other day, like I owed them late fees because I missed payments. And it wasn't a lot of money. I knew I was going to pay, and so I let it go. And so I find before I even paid the money, I call him on the phone. Now I'm super nice with this guy on the phone, and tone of voice is all the difference in the world. And so I'm like, all right, so how do I pay you guys? When do I owe you? I'm going to pay. I just want to make sure I get everything right. And so he laid it all out for me. And this is a collections guy, right? This is a guy that's used to people whining, complaining, calling names, all that nonsense. So I think, I changed my tone of voice and I say, hey, how about, what? Why don't you guys just forgive all the late fees and all the late charges? Why don't you just do that? And I said that like it was the silliest thing in the whole world. And the guy kind of laughed and he goes, well, you got to pay off your debt first. I'm like, oh, okay, you can do this. But just because I made you feel like telling me that. So I'm like, all right, so yeah, I go, are you telling me that if I just pay the balance, not the late fees, just the balance, that if I call you guys back in 2 weeks, I get somebody else on the phone and he'll waive all the late fees? And the guy kind of laughed. He goes, yeah. I go, awesome. And so I didn't pay any of the late fees or the interest. I just paid the charges. So I call back in 2 weeks and I do what we refer to as we call this the Brandon 3-step. Brandon is my son and the president of my company, and he's always coming up with innovative ways to get breaks. And so, I start out the conversation with this guy, this credit card guy. Now understand, these are all legitimate charges. I got no legitimate reason for asking this stuff to be waived. And so I hit him with our first move, and our first move, knowing where I'm going to take him, the first move is a tough one. I go, all right, I'm getting ready to make your day miserable. And there's this sigh on the other end of the line, because this guy's customer service debt collection guy. I mean, he's getting in screaming matches all day long. You can just imagine what's, I'm going to tell him I got polio, I'm a quadriplegic, my parents are dying, my grandma's dying for the third time, God knows what they've heard, right? And some of it is true, right? So he just goes, okay. Now you gotta wait. You gotta wait for that moment where they brace themselves. And so I've just re-anchored his emotional process. Now I gotta disabuse him of any notions about me by calling him out. And plus I gotta set him up for where we're going. So I go, I know I'm gonna sound like just another lazy, self-centered, self-serving deadbeat who's got no justification whatsoever to ask you to waive all these legitimate charges that I legitimately owe. And now I can tell he's starting to perk up because it's not as bad as he thought. Plus I get all this negative stuff coming out of his brain. And I can immediately tell he's feeling better. He goes, no. He says, I see here that you actually you paid your balance in full. Recently, you paid the whole thing in full. And he's perking up. And so I go, how many people are going to be angry with you if I ask you to waive the remaining late fees? He goes, no, I can do that easily. I can do that. Yeah, I can try. Yeah. He says, it's a pleasure helping you out. I mean, it's an absolute pleasure talking to you on the phone. He says, hold on for a second. Now, I have taken this guy where I led him to at the end of this call. I guarantee you is the best he's felt all day. And this gets back to everybody could help you if they just feel like it. How do you walk them through? My big advantage is everybody else thinks negotiation is about beating down the other side. I don't beat anybody down. We don't beat anybody down. We don't beat anybody down. Everybody we make a deal with, when we're done, they feel better about their life, themselves, and a day by the time we get to the end of our interaction. Or we don't make a deal and they still feel better about themselves, their life, and the day. Like every interaction, we're leaving the world a better place than it was when we found it. And it's astonishing. And then your life gets so much more enjoyable and you have more.
It's interesting that you mentioned at the start those, thinking in win-win terms or thinking in win-lose terms. I remember the first book, the first real non-fiction book I ever read was Stephen Covey's The 7 Habits. And if I remember correctly, I think it's probably like habit 4 or habit 5. And there's a few things in Covey's work which could sort of link into yours, think win-win and then seek first to understand, then be understood. I think
Right.
when I started reflecting on this, it made me think. I was like, in that book, Covey comes across almost saint-like, but then I'm like, I bet that Covey was the type of guy that would never split the difference as well.
I agree with you 1,000%. I mean, I'm a huge Stephen Covey fan. And if we've evolved anything from Covey's ideas, that would be tremendously flattering to think that we learned anything from him. And I got to tell you something. I think Covey just wanted people to have better lives, to get more. The name of Stuart Diamond's negotiating book is Getting More. I think that's what Covey wanted. I think he wanted everybody to have more and not make enemies while they were doing it.
Yeah, and I love that story which you told up there with your credit card company. And it made me sort of think back to when I listened to some of your other podcasts as well, and you give some great stories about, that contrast effect of, I'm just going to really ruin your day by, I'm so sorry. And I heard another great story about, didn't something similar happen in a hotel, which is notorious for bad things happening? I wonder, could you share that story?
Yeah, and it's the same thing because again, like every time we check into a hotel as a team, my son Brandon is always got the best room in a hotel, which annoys the heck out of me because I'm the boss. I'm supposed to have the best room, and he always ends up with the best room. And finally, we the whole team we check into a hotel one day, and we go, "Hey, we'll come up to your room. We'll meet in your room." He goes, "No, that's okay. I'll come down and get you." His room was so nice. He was on a floor we couldn't even get on. I mean, he had the presidential suite on a secluded floor. I mean, I'm paying a bill. I can't even get on a floor. And we get in there, and he's like, "Okay, that's the guest bathroom over there. You guys are only allowed to use a guest bathroom." It was just crazy. But it was a way he was getting these great upgrades in a hotel. And every hotel you check into, there's something they could do for you, even if they don't have upgrades. Like they can give you extra points. Everybody at a hotel front desk has been given a certain latitude to instantly make a customer happy. They got throwaways. One day I was talking to a hotel, they're out of suites, they're out of this, they're out of that. And the guy says, he says, I give you 10,000 more bonus points on your membership. And I'm like, wow, that makes all the sense in the world. You guys got to have that latitude. You don't tell anybody because most people don't tell you, they don't make you feel like it. So Brandon's doing the same thing with the hotels. He walks up to the front desk clerk and he says, I'm getting ready to make your day horrible. And you just watch them fall. I mean, it's, oh God. It's like in a hotel, they've seen everything. I mean, they were you dealing drugs in a room? Did you have a human sacrifice? Is there a goat in your suitcase? You're going to sacrifice a goat in a room? God knows what these people have seen. So, they're whatever their mind goes to, what you're giving them is way simpler and way easier, and they probably have the latitude to do. And we walk them through the same 3 steps. Reset their expectations. Everybody's got an amygdala. The amygdala is negative. You give that amygdala just enough time to kick into gear, think up horrible things. You just watch them melt. But the thing is, where you're going to leave them when you're done. Inside of 3 minutes, they are going to feel great about themselves, probably better than they felt all day. And I'm not going to deny them that. And then we walk them through, I'm self-centered, I'm a traveler who wants stuff he's not entitled to. What are the things that are going to go through their mind when you make your ask? All these things are eminently predictable. All the things we would want to deny. I don't want you to think I'm another self-centered traveler. What would you want to deny? Just lay it out, bang, bang, bang. And then the last move is the how question. It's very deferential. It tees things up in a delightful way. It's not an attack. Your tone of voice has got to be good. And you tee it up with a how question. It's kind of like a bank shot in pool, billiards, whatever you call that game. And you're gonna deactivate the last negative emotion. The last negative emotion that they're gonna think if they give you what you want is somebody's gonna get mad at them. How mad are these people gonna be at you if you do this for me? I had one hotel I did this in Atlanta recently. The young lady says, I don't have the latitude to do that. My manager does. If you want, I'll be happy to go back in the back and talk to him on your behalf. Now, what's going to happen here is eminently predictable. She's going to go back and talk to the manager, and he's going to read right away whether or not she's dealing with a jerk or somebody that she's comfortable with. And she's going to go back there, and she's either going to say, look, I got this jerk out front who wants something for free. I told him I'd check with you. And the manager's like, got it. No, you can tell, I'll be the bad guy. You can tell him I turned you down. Or she's going to go back out. She's going to say, hey, you know what? There's this guy out here. He ain't a bad guy. And he's just, we got suites that are open. I mean, I can't get him into it right now, but I've already checked, which she had. She said, I can move him tomorrow. The hotel's not full anyway. This is probably going to be somebody's going to talk. She's going to make the pitch. I got to put her in the mood to make that pitch. She comes trotting right back out in front. She said, my manager okayed it. Here's how I want you to call me later this evening. I can give you an estimate when that suite's going to be open for you tomorrow. Make sure you have your bags packed. We will send someone to your room to move you to make sure that it's convenient for you. She's got all this implementation laid out in her head. So, and she felt great because half the people that are coming up there, they're complaining to her. They're going to walk away asking for more than she gave. She's not going to feel good about 90% of her interactions. She's going to feel fantastic about this interaction. She's going to feel like she really helped somebody by the time she gets done with me. And again, it's probably going to be the best she's felt all day. This is not a bad place to leave somebody.
Definitely. I love that. One of the things I'd love to touch on really, which sort of ended up becoming quite a philosophical question for me when I was reading your book. It made me reflect. I think it was page 115. And obviously the title of the book is Never Split the Difference. And, growing up, you hear lots of people giving, lots of different relationship advice. And one of the things which I've been told over the years is, look, compromise is king. You know, compromise is what makes the world go round. It's the key to a great relationship. And you give the story in the book of, you know, if you've got two sets of shoes and compromise is, you know, the king, you're going to end up with one black shoe and one brown shoe on.
It's nuts, right?
So could you talk about this? Because this fascinates me. I reflect on this so much.
Yeah, and I got to tell you, compromise might be the most damaging sin in negotiation. I mean, it's sloth. You know, one of the seven deadly sins is sloth. I mean, people compromise because I'm sorry, it's going to sound harsh, because you're lazy, because you want it to be over, because you don't want to do the extra work. You know, you want an easy way out. And I see compromise over and over again, destroying companies, destroying relationships. You know, there was back in, I think, the 1970s or the 1980s in the US, there was this cartoon about a husband and a wife. It was called The Lockhorns. And somebody sent me an old version of that the other day. And the husband was said to the wife, let's compromise. That way we'll both be unhappy. I mean, compromise is a recipe for unhappiness. I don't see that as a great strategy. Let's take part of your idea and part of my idea, and let's make sure we're both unhappy. And therefore it's fair because we're both unhappy. Like negotiation is about great relationships. What great relationship is based on both sides being unhappy? Take the word compromise out of negotiation and put it into your moral principles. And I say, hey, how about if you compromise your moral and ethical principles? You'd be insulted if I asked you to do that. So how is it a great word in one vernacular, in one context, and it's an insult in another? That probably indicates to you that one of those two sides are wrong. And my money is on that it's wrong to compromise in deals. So, you know, we're taught, I think the spirit of compromise, I think the intention of the spirit of compromise is the intention of being open-minded. Now, that's a good intention. The intention of hearing the other side out. The intention of entertaining the idea that you might not be completely right and that the other side may actually have something to really contribute to the conversation. Now, that's a whole different approach that I think has fallen under compromise, and maybe some great ideas, people who were great at something but couldn't really explain why. They said, okay, well, it's, you know, I don't know why it turned out so great. Maybe I compromised. Like in the world of sports, it's a cliche, but it's true. The great performers are poor coaches. The greatest coaches were people who struggled performing, so they studied it. What does that mean? A great performer, you know, whatever sport it is, they can't really explain why they had a great outcome. And maybe that's why the word compromise somewhere along the line, you know, got a good feeling behind it in negotiation. But it's just not a great thing. It's just not.
Yeah, I find it fascinating, you know, like when I think back, the amount of times I've heard it in relation, you know, in relationship advice, and you know, that really made me, you know, reflect on it. And then I thought, okay, you know, what is a better strategy? And you know, and listening back to it, and you know, it sort of made me think that just as you were talking about there, just being just insanely curious to the other person's position. I know you talk about curiosity a lot, so I wonder if we could talk about that and just how important that is.
Curiosity is like the most ridiculous emotional intelligence hack, performance hack. I mean, there's so many ways that genuine curiosity works on your behalf. First of all, it's impossible to be angry and genuinely curious at the same time. I mean, people are always asking, you know, the different black swans in my, you know, on my team. And we're all black swans. I mean, that's what we really are. You know, people that do the little things that make all the difference in the world. The little 2 millimeter shifts that change everything. So people are always asking us, well, how do I keep from getting mad? And the short answer is, if you're incurious, you can't get mad. I mean, it's impossible to be genuinely curious and be angry at the same time. So first of all, it's a shortcut. If you say to yourself, oh, wow, what in the world is making this person say this crazy stuff? Where are they coming from? The curiosity is a hack. Now, then the next thing, curiosity is a highly positive frame of mind. Then there's no shortage of data out there. There's no shortage of data out there now that tells us that we're actually smarter in a positive frame of mind. One of my favorite TED Talks is by a guy named Sean Acker, a Harvard psychologist, and his TED Talk is a happiness advantage. And he's the source of my data on this. And Sean says in his talk, you're 31% smarter in a positive frame of mind. So it's not emotions that are bad for negotiations. It's not emotions that are bad for human performance. It's negative emotions. Positive emotions actually make you smarter. So when you're in a curious state of mind, you're highly positive, you're smarter. Your pattern recognition increases. Your ability to see the way, to see the patterns, you see them faster. Your mental endurance increases. The whole study of the mindset of flow. Flow is a highly positive state of mind. In flow, in the zone, we're capable of things that we could never do before. So, curiosity is an element of that. So many things feed into it in terms of human performance. So the short answer is curiosity. If you can maintain curiosity, you'll get better every day.
I loved what you're talking about there in terms of the happiness stuff. So could we say take that to a real practical tip and maybe say before we send out an email or a text or before we walk in the door to greet our parents or our spouses, we could just smile, could just sort of change our state. Would that be a good way to go about things?
It's an excellent way. It's an excellent way. And you can force a state change. There's hardwired neurological responses. If you force a smile onto your face, there's a hardwired connection between the nerves in your face and the neurons in your brain. And it starts a chemical change where you actually give yourself a hit of dopamine and serotonin. I mean, it's a hardwired response. They've done psychological experiments where, for example, they ask people to hold a pencil in their mouth. Don't let your lips touch the pencil. Essentially, you're mimicking a smile. And they saw that there was a corresponding uptick in human performance. They did a study with women who were depressed, and they gave them Botox so they were no longer able to frown. They took away the mouth's ability to frown. And as soon as they took away your ability to frown, their mental abilities picked up initially, because as much of a boost as a smile was, a frown was also something that was holding people back. So there's hardwired responses. I mean, I intentionally do this on a regular basis. I drove the people in my team crazy the other day because we were doing a training session, and I'm sitting in the back of the room where the only person in the entire room that could see me is my son, who's presenting. He's teaching at the front of the room. He could see me. I'm behind all the participants, and I'm dead center in the back, and I start going in the back of the room because I was tired. I wanted to give myself a couple of hits of dopamine. And my son he's looking around, and if there's anybody that's sensitive that looks on my face, it's going to be, the closest person in the room to you, your partner, whoever it is. And he's sitting back there, and finally he's just like, "What are you trying to get me to understand right now?" and he just burst out in front of the room. And I'm like, "Oh, no, I'm sorry. I'm giving myself hits of dopamine while you're up front." I'm so sorry, because I know I look like a psychopath in the back. But yeah, you can override the system. You can override the system and intentionally give yourself small hits of neurochemicals that'll boost your performance.
Yeah, sure. And I suppose, as you talked about those mirror neurons, when I see you smile, I can't help but smile.
Right. Yeah, there you
And
go.
that would obviously be powerful, say in a negotiation or something, because then you're changing the other person's state so they think more clearly.
You're 1,000% right. That's right, are the magic words.
That's right, the magic word. So I'd love to just delve into just briefly touch on some more of the tactics which you talk about in the book. One of the things which I really wanted to pick up on was mirroring and the Chris Watts story. Now,
Right.
I love this story so much. I think this was, when I look at your book, I think one of the reasons why I think it's done so well is I think it's one of the only books that I've read in which, having listened to your podcasts, your voice is, it's like exactly as you would just write, it's like you're speaking it and the words are just exactly on the page, which is quite, strange, I found, for an author, but also it's like they're actually reading it to you. So, but I digress at that point anyway. But yeah, but the Chris Watt story and the mirroring, and I guess why that's so powerful.
Yeah, and I'll do a commercial for Tal Roz, our co-author, because Tal Roz, helped my son and me, my son Brandon and I. Tal, we wrote the book together, although Brandon's uncredited on the cover. But Tal is a genius writer. Like, he's a business writer. And I had he had co-authored another book called Never Eat Alone, and I had read that some
By
years
Keith
earlier. And
Ferrazzi, was it?
yeah,
Keith
Keith
Ferrazzi.
Ferrazzi's book.
Ferrazzi, yeah.
And I'm like, I love reading this book. It's entertaining, it's digestible, it's not a heavy lift. And ultimately, every book that Tal touches becomes a New York Times or Wall Street Journal bestseller. Every business book, he's a business writer. And he's the genius behind the structure of the book. And he captured the voice and he made it digestible. And it's one of the reasons why the book is still selling massively globally, because he wrote it so well and captured my voice, captured the appropriate voice.
Wow.
All right, so Chris Watts.
Chris Watts.
What's a mirror? A mirror is repeating the last 1 to 3 words of what someone has just said. It's not the body language mirror that everybody's learned, and I don't know, NLP or whatever that kind of stuff is. This is not, mimicking their body language. It's just repeating. A hostage negotiator's mirror is just repeating the last 1 to 3-ish words of what somebody's just said. And, when you get good at it, you can move it from a selected 1 to 3-ish words. And it's a great skill when you're stunned by what the other person said. I mean, because if you just develop that skill, there's nothing easier than learning how to mirror. Nothing easier. You don't even have to think to repeat 1 to 3 words. No thought required. Just practice getting it down. So I'm on the phone with this bank robber, and he says something to me about chasing his driver away, because we are pretty sure we got the getaway car out front of the bank. It's registered to the guy we believe is inside the bank, who's been hiding his identity. I've been tasked with bracing him about the van and his identity. We've already got a voice ID, 99.99% sure that Chris Watts is in a bank. So I'm gonna wander into this. I'm gonna walk him into how we know who he is real slowly by telling him about the van. And we've ID'd every driver, every owner of the van, and talked to him except one. There's one van outside we haven't found the owner of. And as it turns out, you are probably that guy. So I'm walking him into this, having no idea that there's a getaway driver who's gotten away. None. And so I start talking about the van, and he says, well, we only have one van. I said, you only have one van? He says, yeah, well, when my driver saw the police, he cut and run. I said, he cut and run? He said, yeah, you chased my driver away. We chased your driver away? Yeah, he cut and run. I got no idea what he's talking about. None. And I'm so stunned that I'm just repeating what he says. And this ends up being so damaging that they go out and they find the getaway driver. Chris Watts, who's the guy who said this to me, is an insanely manipulative guy. This is probably one of the only things that have come out of his mouth that he blurted out, that he didn't think about in advance, which is what you're trying to get people to do. You want them to do what we refer to as, I know it's going to sound, harsh and disgusting, but you want people vomiting information. You want them blurting stuff out without thinking about it at the time, because it's probably going to be insanely true and insanely unguarded. And he starts blurting out information about another guy, which means we're probably going to catch this guy, which means this guy's going to give him up. I mean, this is completely against his best interest, but he can't help himself, because that's what a mirror does. It gets people to blurt out information. And it was one of the most powerful skills. And Watts, as it turns out, bore all the attributes of the great manipulative, cutthroat negotiator in all business deals. And this was in a bank robbery.
Yeah. You also give the story, you know, on a, I would say, more of perhaps applicable to, you know, what the average everyday person listening to this would go through. Would be, you give a great story of this woman sitting in her office, and her boss comes along and he's like, look, he's like, can you do this? Can you do this paperwork? Can you put it on file? And again, she was like, I was like, you know, this isn't fair. I don't really want to do this. So she just starts repeating the last three. And then he just starts talking through his own logic, and then he just comes to the same conclusion. He's like, okay, it's like, this actually doesn't make sense.
Right. Yeah, yeah, it was nuts. I mean, and she was so astonished at everything that he was saying because, this is a few years ago when we first started going digital, and then there are a lot of people. Even today, people want hardcover. They want the paper. It makes them feel good. They can touch it. I don't know what it is, but she had this massive report, and all of it could have fit on a disk, or they could print out thousands of documents that she knows the client doesn't want. But this dude is an old school guy that it makes him happy. He feels good with paper. The great problem with the golden rule is treat people the way you want to be treated. Well, since paper made him feel good, then it's got to make the client feel good because I like paper. That is just so wrong. And so not only does he want this entire report, which is thousands of pages, but he wants it in duplicate. And she starts printing out, saying like in duplicate, hard copies, 2 copies for each. And he starts saying this stuff out loud, and he starts walking himself into, what are we gonna, if the client doesn't want it, what are we gonna do with it? And he finally says, you could store it in my office. And her last mirror was, store it in your office? And he thinks like, you could tell the wheels are turning, and he realizes his office got enough stuff in it already he doesn't need. So it's like, just make the digital copies and forgetting about it. If they ask us for hard copies, we'll supply them. And all she did was mirror him. And there's so much nonsense banging around inside of some people's heads that if you just become a really effective sounding board for them and let them hear it out loud themselves, they will talk themselves out of bad outcomes that they would never have talked themselves out of if you didn't become this great sounding board for them.
How do you feel when, you hear these great stories of, of just genuine, everyday people that use your techniques, and, it genuinely, works them? Because, I mean, let's be honest, there are people out there that will take advantage. There undoubtedly, I mean, obviously you're a hostage negotiator. There are, even, whether it's intentional or not. And I see it as sort of, it gives that everyday person the chance to sort of balance things out, really. So it's like, obviously, that must make you enormously proud when you see just the average everyday person not getting taken advantage of.
Yeah, I got to tell you something. The feeling is phenomenal. I mean, it's, I was taught to be a little leery of pride, but the gratification, that we're actually helping people make their lives better. They're having better relationships. They're not leaving enemies in their wake. I mean, while they're making their lives better, they're not doing it at somebody else's expense. I mean, I'm a strong believer in business is really what makes our societies better. Out of control business needs to be checked by government. But, Bono, I think at the World Economic Forum, said not that long ago, capitalism has brought more people out of poverty than any other ism. And I think that's absolutely true. Capitalism, better business, better negotiations, benefits mankind in ways that nothing else that we've seen. And that doesn't mean that it doesn't still need some guidelines, some checks, some occasional constraints. But if it's the ism that has done the world more good than any other ism, then it's in all of our best interest to make it better and make it work better. So yeah, leaving the world a better place is enormously gratifying.
What's the thing that you're most proud of in your life and your career to date?
Wow. Everybody on my team is ultimately not just the people that we serve, but everybody that works, with us, for us. they really enjoy what they're doing, and they're even if they weren't taking their life to a better place, they're also taking their life to a better place. I mean, we're lifting people up, so that they're going to have more. They're going to have a bigger house. They're going to give their kids more, and on the way, they're going to feel better about it. I mean, we get people working at all hours. I mean, we get virtual assistants that don't feel they work for the virtual company that provide us. They feel that they're black swans, and they happily respond to my text messages at all times. Like, uh, I had 2 nights ago. I'm in a time zone where everybody's clock is 2 to 3 hours later than mine.
Mhm.
I'm getting text messages reminding me of an early morning meeting at 9 o'clock at night, which means it was 11 or midnight in the places where these people are sending me texts, because they're looking out for me, because they like looking out for me, because they like making the team better. I mean, that's a cool thing. Everybody that works for us is happier than they were before they started working for us, and that's another thing that I'm really, really get a lot of happiness and satisfaction out of.
Amazing. That's amazing. One of the major ideas of the book is obviously tactical empathy. And I think that you're the one chapter you dedicate to labeling emotions. I think that I couldn't do a podcast without delving into this, because this is so, so key. So could we just delve into this and the power of this?
Yeah, I mean, it's another a simple thing. It's one of the most effective things. I mean, basically, it's calling out emotions and labeling them. That's why we call them labels.
Mm.
And it's nearly it's close enough to be a fault-free application of a skill if you label what you're hearing. And what we found, you hear a positive dynamic, it reinforces it. Sounds like a great long-term relationship's important to you. People go like, yeah, yeah, it is. But the more powerful thing is to call the negatives out fearlessly, not deny them, call them out. I mean, that's where we really accelerate outcomes. Because if you feel like I'm pushing you around, or if I have reason to suspect that you might feel that I'm pushing you around, even if it's only because you're paranoid or you had a bad experience with somebody else. My typical reaction in the past would have been, look, I don't want you to feel like I'm pushing you around, which is going to cause you to get defensive and have completely the opposite impact. What people can't imagine is if you just take the 2 millimeter shift, the black swan shift, and say, probably feels like I'm pushing you around.
Mm.
That will actually deactivate it. Your reaction is going to be like, no, no. And I actually appreciate you being candid with me. I actually appreciate you being cautious of my feelings. But no, that thought didn't enter my head. Or if it did feel like I was pushing you around, then I said, I'm sure it seems like I'm pushing you around. Your reaction would be relief. You'd be like, wow, you're not oblivious to the fact that I might perceive you to be a jerk. And you're going to be ridiculously appreciative of the fact that I'm not oblivious to the negative effects I could have on you. So this labeling thing, which when we first started bringing hostage negotiation out of the hostage negotiation world into the business world, we didn't think labels were going to be that big of a deal. And we have found, my son and I principally, and Derek as well, we have found there's nothing more effective. I mean, it went from almost being a throwaway skill to like our most effective, impactful, and flexible skill overall. I mean, we're using it to cut deals right and left that, are astonishing and leaving us with great relationships simultaneously.
Yeah, it is really it is really an emotionally intelligent skill, no question. I'd love to, because
That's
obviously
right. Yeah,
yeah.
no, that's right, Adam. Good job.
Oh, one of the things in the book which you talk about is that late night FM DJ voice. So I wondered, could you give me a sentence here, and I can try and see if I can get the Chris Voss stamp of approval.
Sure. Well, the late night FM
FM
DJ.
DJ. So just remind me, is this the assertive one where it's like, no, I don't want to do that?
Well, it's when you need to be assertive, but you got to be assertive in a gentle fashion.
Mm,
And in point of fact, assertion is a necessary element of great negotiation. Assertion without emotional intelligence is counterproductive. Then it's aggression
mm,
and it's blunt force trauma and it's counterproductive. But the other side's got to know where you're coming from. I mean, otherwise, if you don't assert your best interest, they got to guess, and they're probably going to guess wrong, and then you're going to be mad because they didn't look out for your best interest. I mean, failing to assert is as problematic as any flaw. But you just have to assert in an emotionally intelligent way. You don't want to make people feel accused, attacked, backed into a corner. And one of the great things to do is if you have to turn somebody down over something, that's when the late night FM DJ voice got to come into play. You got to say it in an emotionally intelligent way. But even if the word is no, I mean, you could go no, which your tone of voice is saying, "You idiot! How dare you! I hate you and your family and your clothes," because that's the way they're going to react. Or you could go, "No."
I love this. Yeah, I love this.
There's 1,000% different there.
Yeah, of
Or,
course.
if there's a clause in a contract that you can't do, you say, "We don't do that." Again, tone of voice is insulting. Or you could say, "We don't do that." And the other side is going to feel like, okay, let's see how we can work on this. Because they didn't feel attacked. So the late night FM DJ voice is great for two times. When you have to lay out something that is immovable and you need the other side to feel like it's immovable without feeling attacked or backed into a corner. The other time is when emotions are elevated. And in these times of the coronavirus pandemic, everybody's emotions are elevated. So we used to say the late night FM DJ voice, you should use it about 10 to 15% of the time. And you should have the smiling voice, an upbeat, positive voice, making them smarter in the moment. That should be your voice about 85% of the time. In the crisis mode that we're in globally, the late night FM DJ voice probably ought to be your default voice about 85% of the time. It helps people get their emotions under control. It's the fastest way to get people's emotions under control. Let your voice soothe them and calm them so that they're not being driven by fear. It's huge. It's positive. It's powerful.
Is the late night FM DJ voice the thing which the most people come up and speak to you about the book? Because I'd love to know how you came to label it the late night FM DJ voice. I think it's great.
Yeah, well, it was way back when trying to figure a handle to describe it.
Mm.
It was just a social reference, before the age of digital music and iTunes and musical streaming and all the digital downloads. Principally, everybody could relate because, everybody listened to the radio and they were basically the two bandwidths. They were AM and FM, and AM was principally information and FM was principally music. And then the radio broadcasters that were on AM stations late at night, they all had these calming, soothing voices. Get you to listen to them, and everybody could relate to it as a social reference. And we've just continued to use it, and that term sort of stuck, even if we've used it so much nobody knows what an FM DJ is, but it's got its own sort of recognition because it's been used so much in our vernacular, and then we illustrate.
I love that. I love that. I've got to read an Instagram follower question from a spider. This is from Brandon Hill, and he says, "Do you have any negotiating tactics that could help my dating life?"
I got to tell you something. Use your powers for good and not evil. All right. But yeah, dating life, people want to be listened to. Interesting people. There's an old saying: interesting Interesting people are interested.
Mm.
So labeling and mirroring and being genuinely interested in the other person is a great way for you to seem interesting. Get them talking about themselves. Most people can't carry a conversation because they either don't know how to make small talk, or when they talk about themselves, they're ridiculously boring. But when somebody's talking about themselves, they're fascinated. So it's a great way to get somebody talking about themselves, get a lot of information out of somebody. They're doing all the work. There's no shortage of better relationships. Yeah, it'll help your dating. Be genuinely interested. Use labeling and mirroring. Use an encouraging voice. And be genuinely interested in the other person. And I promise you that your dating life and all your relationships are going to improve.
And don't wear the black and the brown shoe at the same time.
Don't wear the black shoe and a brown shoe at the same time, unless like maybe you're going for crazy effect.
Absolutely. One of the things I heard you say on another podcast was you talked about the power of correction and how
Oh God.
this is like a drug for us. So could we just touch on this?
The urge to correct is irresistible. It might as well be one of the deadly sins. I mean, the other person's desire to correct you, they will blurt stuff out that they would never say otherwise. They would blurt stuff out that is clearly against their interest to say. But to correct is so satisfying
Mm.
that they cannot fight the urge to correct you. And then the secondary benefit is having corrected you, they felt great about it. Everybody knows the phrase, people don't remember what you said or what they said. They remember how they felt in the moment. So it's a great way to get information that they shouldn't tell you and have them not regret giving it because it felt so good in the moment. And we trigger people into intentional corrections all the time. It was a British company that we were coaching in a business negotiation, and they knew there was a problem on the other side of the table. They could guess approximately where the problem was with what executive, but they could only guess within about 2 or 3 executives. So they just decided to trigger the other side into telling them via correction. They sat down at the table, and I'll use the names Tom and Bob as an example. And they said, it seems like both Tom and Bob are against this proposal. And the other side immediately shot back, no, it's not Tom, it's Bob. Well, instantly, this is relatively proprietary team information about deliberations that are going on the other side. Exactly who on your side is the problem? Most people aren't going to answer that question because they're going to be worried about the ramifications. What are we giving away? Who are we giving up? Who are we throwing into harm's way? But since it was a correction, the other side shot it back initially and gave up information that, in fact, moved the situation forward, but otherwise would have been closely held that they never, who's the problem on the other side? Well, it's not really, there's an individual that's a problem. I'm sure would have been the response to the question. They would have danced around it because they would have been concerned about giving up the information. But turn it into a correction via a label, and the other side's going to spit it out before they realize what they've said, and they're not going to feel guilty about it because it felt so good to say it at the time.
Wow. Look, I appreciate that we're running out of time. And I can't, obviously, once again, I can't thank you enough for coming on the show. So I've just got one more question about negotiation, and then we'll just talk about where our audience can connect with you.
Perfect.
So one of the things I was thinking about when I was reading this book was I was thinking about a mental model, which Shane Parrish, I know you were on Shane's show. Shane was on the show a couple of weeks ago, and he was talking about the mental model inversion. So, like an example of this would be a principle from mathematics. Instead of asking, "How can I be happy?" you flip it and say, "How can I be unhappy?" And then you think, "Okay, well, I'll take a meaningless job. I'll disrupt my sleep. I'll eat processed food. I'll get involved in toxic relationships. I'll get involved in financial debt." So just by sort of flipping it, you realize, okay, if I just don't do those things, I'm on my way to happiness. So it's a really powerful mental model. So I'd love to know,
Thought.
yeah, so I'd love to know what would be the inversion of a good negotiator?
What would be the inversion of a good negotiator?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, or somebody who doesn't listen. Somebody's determined to go first. Somebody who's, a bad negotiator is somebody who's determined to get their point across first. Um, a bad negotiator exaggerates what they want
Mm-hmm.
because that's by definition deception. And exaggerating what you want drives deals away from the table that you would otherwise be able to make. I mean, I hate not making a deal. And, if somebody gets on the phone with us initially, and I can smell somebody who's going to exaggerate what they want or try to get us for nothing. I mean, I'm off the phone. Now, there probably would have been a deal there somewhere, but you're so annoying that you're not gonna be worth the trouble. You're just not. So, Joe Polish, a good friend of mine, he runs something called the Genius Network out of Phoenix, Arizona. Joe has a phrase he calls these people, half, hard, annoying, lame, and frustrating. He says you want to eliminate all the halves from your life. You want to deal with the elves, the easy, lucrative, and frustrating. And he said, that the L in half could even be lucrative, hard, annoying, lucrative, and frustrating. But those people are just so hard, annoying, and frustrating, they're not worth it. So, if you're annoying, if you're frustrating for somebody to deal with, it's costing you money. And you're not going to feel it because your low batting average, your low percentage of success is going to be completely obscured because it was so satisfying to slaughter the other side that you don't realize that you're leaving so much money on the table and there's so many deals you're not making. That's a bad negotiator.
What really impresses me about you, Chris, is that you talk a lot in just general lay terms. But having read your book and listened to, pretty much every interview I could find, your knowledge of human psychology is just amazing. Which leads me to think that below the surface, there's, a lot
There's a,
going on under there. So
there's a
I'd love to know.
caveman. There's a caveman below the surface. Fred Flintstone.
So I'd love to know, what are some of the books which have impacted your life?
Yeah, well, I got one of them over here. I mean, The Rise of Superman, Stephen
Stephen
Kotler.
Kotler, yeah.
It's about human performance, and anything that's got Kotler's name on it is worth reading. Stealing Fire is another fantastic book. He's got some collaborations with a guy named Peter Diamandis that I like, but I like the ones that Kotler wrote by himself. Daniel Coyle wrote 2 books that are worth reading: The Talent Code, about how do you get better, and The Culture Code, about how do you make your team better. I think those are fantastic books. I mean, we're scooping stuff up all over the place. Eric Barker's got a great book called Barking Up the Wrong Tree, about the science of success, also written in very plain language. I got Eric's book over here. This is worth picking up. It's good stuff. Eric is a very straightforward guy. And then, of course, my partner Derek Gaunt in our company wrote a great leadership book on tactical empathy called Ego, Authority, and Failure. If you're a 1%er, if you're a high performer, you're a reader, and these should be on your list. Each and every one of these.
Let's imagine that, that the world is ending, that this pandemic is taking over the world, and you get the chance to impart your life's wisdom, a non-commercial, but a message that you would love to share based on your life experiences. And conveniently, you happen to be on this podcast to impart your wisdom. What would Chris Voss's message be?
Yeah, well, I mean, the caveman that survived were the ones that collaborated. We have to collaborate. The caveman from the Neanderthal days, they didn't collaborate. They didn't find a way to collaborate and establish working relationships, trusted relationships. That caveman died alone in the dark. So however anybody's going to come out of this, it's got to be through collaboration. You have to be trusted. Trustworthy people trust. The majority of the people out there are trustworthy. There is a percentage, Our guess is anywhere from 20 to 30% out there that aren't. But that means that 70 to 80% of the people you interact with are worth trusting. Tease out what the trusted person, what that profile looks like, roll the dice. You're going to make some mistakes, but this is the same as going to a casino. If you got a gambling system that works better than 51% of the time, you're going to live. 70% of the time, the people on the other side of the table are going to be worth your trust. Just get smarter on what that profile looks like, and you're going to be better off.
I love that. I love that. Could you tell our audience where they can connect with you and if you've got any parting messages?
Yeah, subscribe to our newsletter, The Edge, our newsletter/blog. Go to the website, blackswanltd.com, BLACKSWANLTD.com. One of the tabs at the top is for the blog, The Edge. The Edge is free. It's complimentary. It comes out every Tuesday morning. Actionable negotiation advice that you could put into play 10 minutes after reading the blog, and the blog isn't going to take any more than 5 minutes to read. Concise, actionable. It's not one of those blogs where there's so many options you don't know what to do. We're going to give you one thing to read that day. You can put it into play that day. Plus, it is the avenue to our website, the avenue training announcements. We got a lot of free stuff. We got a lot of really sophisticated stuff that we're going to charge you a lot of money for that you are not going to be ready for until you've gone through the free stuff. Use the free stuff that we have to raise the level of your game. You're going to start making a difference in your life right away, especially in this time frame where negotiation and collaboration is critical to not just surviving, but putting yourself in a position to thrive as soon as this nonsense settles down.
Man, this has been absolutely fantastic. I genuinely can't thank you enough for coming on the show. It's been so great. And if you're in the UK, if the Black Swan are there, you can count me in, my man.
We're gonna find our way to the UK before too much longer. So I appreciate that. It's an absolute pleasure being on your show. Thanks.
Thank you